Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberkaş. 500,000 new cases in just a week. That's how fast the coronavirus is spreading globally. And although some countries have hinted to a partial reopening, citing a decline in new cases, many hospitals are working with dwindling medical supplies. And that scarcity hasn't just impacted less developed nations. Every hard-hit country has been affected. And now some are stepping in to help fill those shortages. Let's take a look at this report. And to break that all down, joining me from Istanbul is Kerem Kinik, who is the president of the Turkish Red Crescent and vice president of the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies. Also from Istanbul, we have Bryza, who is a former U.S. ambassador. And joining from London is Mehmet Ogutcu, who is a former Turkish diplomat and the president of the London Energy Club. Gentlemen, welcome to Straight Talk. It's good to have you here. Competing ideologies, power blocks, leaders, social systems are now being stress tested in the court of world opinion. After China and Russia, Turkey has also joined this soft power race to fight the COVID-19 crisis. Kerem, let me begin with you. Turkey as a country has made a name itself for the last decade with humanitarian efforts through various NGOs, among them the Turkish Red Crescent, of course. Tell us about Turkey's aid efforts for other countries who are facing shortages of medical supplies.
We are facing, as humanity, the biggest biological disasters in this century. And Turkey, as a part of Europe, as a part of epicenter of this biological disaster, receiving many appeal for assistance from more than 100 countries, especially the Turkish Red Crescent. We are also requesting our support, the European regions, especially the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, requesting our support to send especially personal protective equipment. And as far as I know, we could send more than 35 different countries as Turkey, state-to-state aid, and the Turkish Red Crescent, so far we supported 15 countries.
Yeah, but for how long do you think the Turkish Red Crescent can continue with this distribution?
Actually, we have to serve our own communities as well. In the meantime, we have to show our solidarity with our fraternal national societies and eminent nations as much as we can. But this is the protracted crisis, and it will continue many months.
Okay, so Mehmet, Kerem says will continue as long as there's a need for people in Europe. Having exposed deep rifts among the EU countries, how do you think this will help Turkey to mend its relations across Europe, or maybe further them?
Well, first of all, I think that Turkish assistance to European countries as well as other developing nations is a very much welcome humanitarian assistance. We shouldn't see this as part of its diplomacy as Chinese and Russians are trying to do. But on the other hand, it provides an opportunity, of course, to mend ties with both European Union as well as some of the neighboring countries like Syria. And this is a global problem, and the global problems cannot be resolved only by national means. I think Turkey has to show this as an example, and European Union, as we all know, has failed to show this solidarity among its member countries. Look at Italy, so indignant and unhappy about the way it was handled by EU. Even the European Commission president accepted that and apologized to the Italian government. So, but on the other hand, as the Red Crescent chairman indicated, charity begins at home. And Turkey also needs all these medical supplies as well as the assistance as much as possible. And we know that this crisis is not to go away very soon.
For a long time,
We have to be prepared. So we have to have a good balance. I think the priority is the domestic needs. But on the other hand, we shouldn't forget about the humanitarian aspect. And also as part of Corona diplomacy, if you call it that way, to use this as a means of showing solidarity, resolving some of the problems, but not the way that the Russians and the Chinese are trying to.
We're going to get on that. So Matthew, as Trump, as we all know, is struggling with domestic problems, and China is trying to repair its tarnished image hit by the coronavirus, sending plane loads of aid to EU countries. How do you think that has played so far? Because we also know that French President Macron is very critical of China.
Yeah. I think that many people around the world are having the same sort of conversation, wondering what China's real motivation in providing this assistance actually is. And if you look at how it's behaved in terms of investment through its enormous Belt and Road Initiative, the goal of that is obviously to expand China's influence and, in fact, control over some economies. So I think there's a certain degree of suspicion about China's actual intentions, as well as Russia's. I know we'll talk about that in a moment. But as far as the U.S. goes, the biggest providers of this assistance right now among countries are the U.S., China, and now Turkey. The U.S., though, is not really letting anybody know about it. In fact, Secretary of State Pompeo has been silent internationally about U.S. assistance. So there are very different approaches here, but I think what Turkey is doing is excellent and is necessary and is good for Turkey as well, as long as domestic supplies are met. So,
Kerem, we know that Turkey remains among the world's top 8 donors, and it already hosts 4 million Syrian refugees. Tell us how it has been working since the outbreak of the virus, logistically and financially, as Mehmet just mentioned, and tell us, how does the Turkish government keep the balance between making sure the country has enough equipment while sending some abroad?
So we have a huge responsibility beyond our borders as Turkey, because now we are taking care of, 5 million inside Turkey from 70 different nationalities. But in the meantime, the northern part of Syria, almost 4 million people seeking assistance from Turkey as well. So the northern Syria remains a critical concern for us still. There are more than 4 million people in poor shelter and the healthy conditions. Hopefully, alhamdulillah, there is no confirmed cases so far, but yes, we are increasing our manufacturing capacities for the PPEs. In the meantime, we have enough intensive care bed capacity and the hospital capacities, and we are extending by the shelter hospitals by the Turkish Red Crescent capacities. But we have to bestow our hands to our neighboring countries, because this is the global battles, and we have to overcome if we act jointly.
Okay. Also, there is the World Health Organization. Gentlemen, as you know, it has come under fire for its handling of the pandemic, specifically for not following what it was supposed to do. Here are some roles the global health body plays, especially for poorer countries who often require outside resources and expertise. The organization provides leadership by helping countries increase their ability to fight diseases. It distributes vital information and sets the agenda on the study of diseases and illnesses. It sets global standards for public health, safety, monitoring, and implementing health policies, and it makes sure to coordinate the latest data, risks, and outbreaks affecting the world. But we all know it recently has been criticized for being late to act. It was first alerted about the virus in late December. After more than 100 countries reported their first cases, it finally declared a global pandemic on the 11th of March. And it's also been accused of being too accommodating to China. Here's a tweet they released back in January saying there was no evidence of human-to-human transmission. So, Matthew, I think this question is for you. Is Trump's move to defund the World Health Organization despite its problems is a smart move?
Oh, it's a horrible move. It's a horrible move both operationally, given the mission of the World Health Organization that you just described, Aisha, and it's ridiculously damaging to U.S. reputation. It looks mean-spirited. It looks reckless, irresponsible. At a moment where the world is relying more on the WHO than ever, its largest donor. By the way, the funding of the U.S. dwarfs that of China for the World Health Organization. And now the U.S. is going to say, no, we're going to stop the funding. It's a terrible thing to do. And just I'd like to add, too, that all those criticisms, ironically, that you just mouthed toward the World Health Organization, which are valid, are the same for President Trump. Early on, he said this is a hoax. There is no real illness that's nothing worse than the flu. In the beginning, he actually praised President Xi of China for doing a great job. And then now he's criticizing the World Health Organization for the same sort of statements and the same sort of inaction that have on his own watch.
Yeah. So, Mehmet, Washington, Beijing, and Moscow, we all know they're at an information war, amplifying conspiracy theories to one another. We see Russia taking the back seat. But what do you think? Where will this take the world order moving forward? Henry Kissinger said rulers must prepare now to transition to a post-coronavirus world order. What will look like?
Well, I mean, we've been discussing the new world order to emerge since the end of the Cold War, almost 30 years now. It hasn't happened. We are in a sort of a chaos now, multipolar world order. But I believe the notion that the next decades will be shaped by two major powers, China and the United States, and some sort of accommodation also needed for Russia, India, Japan, and the European Union, because the power is changing and shifting towards east, led by India and China, as we know. But there is a very serious leadership crisis we are going through. I mean, with Trump, I don't think that we will be having a global thinking on how to exit this terrible crisis that we have faced now. And in European Union, there is a huge disorder with Brexit, and now lack of solidarity with Corona and financial problems coming up. China has its own domestic problems. And in the first quarter of this year, economy contracted for the first time since 1976, almost 7%. Yes. So, but business will not be as usual as everybody says. However, I believe that we are going to move into a new era. Whether it's going to be a very benign and very well-ordered and nations collaborating, working with another? I doubt it, because we don't have a hegemon.
Yes.
As
So
we used
Matthew,
to have after the Second World War.
Yeah. So Matthew, do you agree? Like China will fill the void after the U.S. is, pulling back its support from various organizations, as well as becoming a more isolationist country?
I do agree. I certainly think the field is clear for China right now because President Trump has pulled back. He has no aspiration to maintain the rules-based international order that it was the custodian of, as Mehmet was just saying. President Trump wants the U.S. to retreat behind its medieval wall and let everyone else fend for themselves. Whereas and the U.S., still is fighting the pandemic, and its economy is going to contract by about 34%, according to Goldman Sachs. China, even though, as Mehmet said, its economy has shrunk by that 7.2%, it is recovering.
Yes.
It's made through, God willing, through the virus. Its economy is getting back on its feet, and it is now the great supplier of this PPE for the world. So it has a great opportunity. The question is, are all the values that underpin this centralized authoritarian system of China, are those going to be appealing? Yes. And will China be able to lead a new international order?
And Kerem, very quickly, last question is to you. Amid these political quarrel, where does Turkey see itself in this fight against this virus?
Actually, this crisis also give us an opportunity for new solidarity. We as a federation, a child of the Spanish flu, we established after the Spanish flu, 1919. The Turkey actually showing his generosity and the solidarity to the international communities. And this is an opportunity for all to cease many fires, to alleviate many sufferings, and to combat many also threats like
yes.
coronavirus globally.
All right. Good luck, gentlemen. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining Straight Talk. Much of the world has been gripped with containing the coronavirus. Now that we're months into this crisis, many companies are working on vaccines and treatment for those who have fallen seriously ill. And one such company is Janssen & Janssen. To get a better understanding of the research they're doing, I'm joined by Demet Russ, who is the managing director of Janssen Turkey, which is a pharmaceutical subsidiary of the multinational giant. Thanks for joining us, Demet. But before we begin, I just wanted to go over some key points as global efforts are currently underway to develop a vaccine for the coronavirus. Now, about 70 research teams worldwide are developing a vaccine, and human trials are already underway in the US, the UK, and China. And from past experience, we know it usually takes 5 to 10 years of research before a safe and an effective vaccine is ready for mass distribution. So, Demet, your company has recently announced a lead vaccine candidate to enter a phase 1 human clinical study by September. What does that mean? Does that mean soon we're going to get a vaccine, or we'll have to wait for at least a year?
So as you have mentioned, the development of a vaccine usually takes more than 5 years. And we're actually right now trying to really squeeze this development process into about a year. Now, we have had experience with developing a vaccine under another health emergency a few years ago when we had the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. And in that situation, we were able to develop a vaccine from the testing in the lab to actually the first clinical trials, as you were mentioning, the phase 1 clinical trials within 6 months. And that's what actually gives us the confidence that we would be able to do the same now as well. And over the next 6 months to be able to develop the vaccine first under the lab conditions, to test it, to do an iterative testing so that we understand both the efficacy profile of the vaccine as well as the safety profile of the vaccine candidate.
Yeah, but tell us, is there a risk of any setbacks? Because since it will not go through the necessary trials, as you have mentioned, I think there are at least 6 phases that a vaccine should go through. So is there any risks?
So first of all, I think within the clinical development, we have an accelerated process, but that actually is mainly due to we are doing things that we would normally do in sequences. We are actually doing them in parallel. So for the preclinical phase, which is happening in the lab, we are actually doing what we would normally do as well to prepare the vaccine for phase 1 trials, which is then going to be for healthy volunteers. And I would just say that this lab testing is very important. That's why we need these next 6 months actually, so that we can be sure of the safety profile, so that it can be tried on the healthy volunteers. So from that perspective, I think by the time we say the safety profile is established, we can go ahead with the phase 1. And I think the other important point to mention is that the vaccine will be ready for emergency use under the current risk of the epidemic.
So I was going to ask that once it's out on the market, who'll get it first? Who will be given the priority? As you mentioned, there are high-risk groups. Who are they?
So this is going to be a dialogue with the healthcare authorities, and I think they will play a key role in deciding actually who would get the vaccine first. But I think when we think about the high-risk groups, we have to start with the frontline healthcare workers who are exposed to this risk very, very highly, of course. And then the next group of patients would be the high-risk patients who also, as we are seeing currently, are under strong threat if they are infected with the virus. And I think the normal population would follow those 2 first groups.
So if it's proven effective, the world will need a significant dosage of this vaccine. How it will be produced and distributed, and will it be accessible and affordable on a global level?
So first of all, I think currently we are investing really immediately at risk without even having completed the preclinical phase of our analysis. We are investing into ramping up the production capacity. We have currently a manufacturing capacity in Europe, but we are investing into developing manufacturing capacity in the US and in other parts of the world. Our intention currently and what we can bring is about 1 billion doses of the vaccine in the first quarter of 2021. And I think there are different companies also working on different platforms, different vaccine platforms as well. And I really, really hope that all of these works are going to end in positive results, and we hopefully will have different vaccines also coming for public safety in early 2021.
Yes, if we get the interim results by late this year, let's say, will it be known for sure for how long a vaccine will provide protection?
I think that's going to be a question that's going to be probably be investigated in the next weeks and months to come as well. But I think there we would need to wait for scientists to give us more information, because it's still very, very early days, as you have mentioned.
And lastly, what could you tell us about Turkey's efforts to find a cure, and how do you think Turkey has been coping with this virus?
I think as in different parts of the world, we see clinicians actually trying different treatments right now, different treatment options to combat the disease once the patients are infected. And I think Turkey, with the Ministry of Health as well, is doing different efforts in testing currently existing medicines. And actually globally, we see a lot of different scientist groups working on exploring how different existing medicines can be used. At the same time, I think there's a lot of screening going on as well, whether some of the medicines that are under development, under phase 2 or phase 3 trials currently, could also potentially be leveraged, used. So I think there's a lot going on, and we really need to stay tuned to scientists. What I think is happening greatly right now is all the results are being shared by all the companies and by all the clinicians very, very quickly. And I think the global scientific community is building an opinion very quickly as well, which is essential.
So I said last question, but very quickly, would you like to say a few words to anti-vaccination activists?
Well, I think this pandemic probably is a good moment to reflect upon what are the big health risks that we need to protect ourselves against. And we see the impact of this pandemic both on people themselves, on the healthcare system, on the healthcare workers. So I think we really need to take a step back and reflect what are the big risks that can be for the society and how do we prevent transmissions so that we have a healthy society globally.
All right, Demet, I'm afraid we're out of time. Thank you very much for joining us on Straight Talk. Appreciate it a lot and good luck.
Thank you very much as well. Stay safe.
And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Ayşe Süberkaş. If you've got any comments, do share them with us on Twitter with the hashtag Straight Talk. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Until next time, take care and goodbye.